By the way, let's be clear here about something. We're assuming this, let's be clear. You should know that Satan does possess power that is well beyond your own. He possesses power that is well beyond human power. And specifically, you should see this morning that he possesses power that includes the ability to perform supernatural signs. I'd like to show this to you. We're going to keep the excursion here brief and avoid any temptation to run too far with it. But I do want you to see that Satan has the ability to perform on a limited level supernatural signs. And so I would like you to turn back with me to Exodus chapter 7. Exodus 7, that may be a familiar sounding section. Should be. You should remember, or you might remember what's going on here. Moses has been called to deliver Israel from bondage to Egypt, right? To deliver Israel from slavery. And at this point, Moses and his brother Aaron, remember, are standing before Pharaoh, and they're demanding that Pharaoh release Israel from slavery. Do you remember that wasn't a task that Moses was especially excited about? Pretty good reason for that. And the reason was that Pharaoh was the most powerful man, the most powerful human being in the world at the time. Moses knew that, remember, because he literally had come of age in Pharaoh's house. And so he understood how daunting that task was. And so Moses objected, and he anticipated that Pharaoh would object. Apparently, he knew that Pharaoh would ask for a sign. I guess that this was discussed with the Lord. And so the Lord gave Moses and Aaron the ability to work these signs to prove that the power that was behind them was his power, that it was the Lord's power. And so taking that understanding into verse 10, there Moses is standing in front of Pharaoh with Aaron, and apparently there is the request for the sign. And the sign, remember, to prove that their power was the power of the living God. Remember, this first sign was to what? It was to take that staff. Remember that you would, tend and keep animals with. It was to take that staff and to throw it on the ground before Pharaoh, maybe like throw it at Pharaoh's feet, and it would turn into a serpent. And the idea there may contain something beyond just a snake. This is maybe a different kind of a reptile. I don't know, but it would have been an impressive thing, right? And so that is the very thing that Aaron does. You can check that out. He throws it down, it becomes a serpent. Should have been an impressive thing, but keep reading. Now look at verse 11. This is what I want you to see. Then Pharaoh called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also came with the magicians or the soothsayers of Egypt. And now look at this. They did the same with their secret arts. For each one threw down a staff, and they turned into serpents. Now some well-intentioned commentators will exhaust the sound principles of biblical interpretation there for the purpose of telling you that Pharaoh's sorcerers performed here some sort of a sleight of hand trick. I read one commentary there that indicated that Pharaoh's sorcerers and magicians, that they were snake charmers, and that they somehow had charmed the snake to be straight, and when they threw it to the ground, that it was able to slither off or whatever. That's a nice attempt, I think, to inject the natural into the supernatural, but the trouble is that that's not what the text indicates, is it? Look at it again. The verse says simply that the magicians of Egypt, now look at it, they did the same with their secret arts. What are the secret arts? Well, you might think of witchcraft, the dark arts, the black arts. What you really need to see here ultimately is that this is satanic, supernatural, sign-working power. It's real. But there's more, and it's important. I want you to see this as well. Look at the end of verse 12. This is a great little addendum. And, we think that Moses wrote all of these books in the Pentateuch. I'm sure he was eager to write this. He says, but Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Right? So Aaron's serpent swallowed up their serpents. That's a great little thing to append on to the end of that verse. But coming out of that, let me give you an important principle here too. Although Satan's power is superhuman power, although his power is supernatural, far beyond our own, you need to take from this the understanding that whatever power he does possess is completely subservient to God's unlimited power, right? We speak of God as being omnipotent. What does that mean? It means that God's power is boundless. It is not limited by anything. God acts, and whatever He acts on, whatever He says, whatever He thinks, breathes out, it's accomplished. That's how you create the world, basically, with your word. You speak it into existence. Satan doesn't have that kind of power. And you keep reading in Exodus, and we'll do this for just a moment here, and this is borne out again almost immediately. The next sign that Moses and Aaron produce at the Lord's command is to turn the water of the Nile into blood. You remember that? Boy, that would have been a stunning thing to do, wouldn't it? Think of the way that society depended on the Nile. And so Moses and Aaron turned it into blood. That's even more impressive than throwing the staff onto the ground and having it come to be a serpent. But we're told, if we keep reading here in Exodus, that the magicians of Egypt produced this sign as well. Clearly they did so on a smaller scale, but apparently they were able to turn, in some fashion, some container of water into blood. Again, that is the supernatural sign-working power that Satan does possess. In chapter 8, you find the plague of the frogs, remember? Where Moses and Aaron caused the frogs basically to come up on the land to the point that they were a plague. But again, the sorcerers managed through their secret arts, through their witchcraft, their dark arts, they managed to reproduce it again on probably a smaller scale, but they pull it off. Okay, now look at chapter 8, verse 16, though. Chapter 8, verse 16. Little change here. Then the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth, that it may become gnats, flying insects through all the land of Egypt. Did you get that? Go turn dirt into flying insects. Verse 17, they did so. And Aaron stretched out his hand with a staff and struck the dust of the earth, and there were gnats on man and beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats through the land of all of Egypt. There's a question for you that I think is begged in the text. The question you should ask before verse 18 is, who can turn the dust of the earth into living, flying insects? I'll tell you who can't. The devil can't. Look at verse 19 here, by verse 18 and 19. 18 says, the magicians tried with their secret arts to bring forth gnats, flying insects, but they could not. So there were still gnats on man and beast. And in verse 19, the sorcerers tap out. And the magician said to Pharaoh, look at this, this is the finger of God. And again, see, the thing that you need to see in that is that although Satan does possess power that is truly superhuman, you need to understand and be blessed by the knowledge of the fact that it is still limited. Satan's power, whatever he has, is subject entirely to the restraints that God has placed on it. But I do want you to take that understanding that there is real sign-working power there. I want you to take that with you back to 2 Thessalonians 2. And again, bearing in mind that it is limited, it's real. And this sign-working power that Satan has that is going to be made manifest through the career of the Antichrist is going to appear to be something that is extremely powerful and awesome. Antichrist is going to come, he's going to produce and work these signs. We'll talk in a few minutes about the false prophet. He's going to come, and in conjunction with the Antichrist, he's also going to do and to produce these signs. And again, the world is just going to be taken captive by these false wonders. I do want to be careful here that we don't ascribe everything that the Antichrist does to supernatural power. Again, let's prove that it's limited. You should understand that while we allow that some of his signs will be really supernatural in origin, I think that we also should affirm that most of his signs are probably going to be the result of just plain old deceit, just plain old-fashioned trickery. We can understand this biblically, of course, because we remember that the devil is the original liar. Remember what Jesus called him in John chapter 8, verse 45? Remember, Jesus called the devil the father of lies. So what that tells you is that above all else, he deals in deception. There is some ability, some supernatural, maybe sign-working potential there, but what he really deals in is deception. And so my own speculation would be that the great majority of the wonders that are produced during the Antichrist's reign of terror, the great majority of these are going to be false. And if you just think about the times that we live in, I think it's highly likely that they're going to be performed maybe through manipulating technology, right? Technology can give the appearance of some amazing things. And so let me just take a minute here and give you one example of the way that I think that technology is going to be manipulated and in order to deceive. In Revelation chapter 13, go ahead and turn there. Revelation 13, and I want you to look at verse 3. You find recorded in this verse what is going to be probably the Antichrist's single greatest act of deception. In fact, this is going to be his act of deception that will probably do more than anything else that he does to gain him the world's allegiance. You can mark your place in 13. We'll come back to it in a little bit, but look at verse 3. John writes, I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain. Now, the idea there is slaughtered. This is a mortal wound. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound, his mortal wound, was healed. Look at the rest of the verse. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. See, the imagery there indicates that the Antichrist will be seen by the world, really the watching world, as having been mortally wounded. We don't want to let the speculation get too far away from us, but maybe this is a televised event. Quite possibly, quite probably, I would think that it would be on television, it would be all over the internet. The world is going to see him as having been mortally wounded, slaughtered. No way that anybody could survive that. But then again, apparently, in the world's view, there's going to be this miraculous healing that takes place. Now, there's not a lot of detail on the occasion given in the text, but what you should understand here is that this is going to be an attempt by Satan to counterfeit as closely as possible what? The death and resurrection of Christ, right? Because remember, the Antichrist is not just one who stands in opposition to Christ, he's one who strives after taking the place of Christ. But what you should see here again is that this is just pure deception. Satan doesn't have the ability to raise the dead. This is going to be deception. It's going to be a sham. The whole thing is going to be staged. Be broadcast everywhere by the media, on the internet, everything else. But again, the thing that you should see there in those verses is that the cumulative outcome is going to be deception on a worldwide scale, right? The whole world, in a sense, is going to buy into it, and they're going to follow the beast. So with regard to the Antichrist's career, what we've seen, first of all, is that lawlessness will characterize him on a personal level. We've seen also that he's going to lead the world to join him in lawlessness, and he's going to do this through trickery, but also through actual signs produced through satanic power.
The hope of a nation. The Savior, He can move the mountain. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered